Here we are, chopping it up with Dave and Spacco.
At the Northmead Midnight Butcher Shop.
Well, gents, welcome to our first official guest episode of the Northmead Midnight Butcher Shop podcast with Dave and Spacco. And today we've got our very first guest, Steve Roddick from Smartline, who's going to sit down with us and talk about all things money and finance related and give us a positive outlook on the world of finance. So, Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks, fellas. Just on your introduction there, I actually, when you sent me that first message, we were meeting at the Northmead Midnight Butchery. I went and did a Google search, and I didn't realise there's actually some butchers that are open at midnight. So they came up in the search. Yeah.
Oh, I don't think I'd like to go to one. No. I was happy to be at this one when it occurred.
That was funny. So, yeah, you don't have to be smart to be a mortgage broker, right?
Yeah. But I am impressed that you were doing your research straight away to work it out.
No, I'm happy to be here.
No, thanks very much.
Yeah, good for having you, mate. Yeah, really interested to see what you have to say. And
It flows along until the Italian Tyler interrupts the conversation. Dave's got to supervise his building.
hey guys, if you like what you hear, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you can receive updates on when new episodes drop.
So back to your intro.
Yeah, back to the intro. We might even leave this in there.
Oh, yeah. To cut a little bit out.
The Tyler.
I wonder how many interruptions we're going to get. Hopefully he's on track now for the rest of it.
Yeah, so look, we'll just go through. We had a list of things here that we'd sent you that we were going to go through, and then we'll just see how it goes. You know what I mean? So look, where did you grow up? How'd you come about? You know?
Yeah, interesting story. My parents are both from Glasgow in Scotland. My dad was in the military. So I was born in Africa in 1962. So that makes me 60 now. Hopefully I've learned all my mistakes by now, but you never know. So born in Africa, started school in Germany on a NATO base and came here when I was 9. My dad transferred from the RAF to the RAAF. So we arrived here when I was 9, first 4 years in Darwin, first 3 years in Darwin, so from 71 to 74, and then Cyclone Tracey came through and wiped out Darwin, and we were evacuated out of there and ended up in the Blue Mountains, essentially, which is where I did my high school.
So were you in Darwin when the cyclone went through?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I was in Darwin. And I remember it as clear as a bell. I didn't have this in my notes, but now that we're talking about it, it did have a significant impact on my life because they tell you all the houses are up on stilts, right?
Yeah.
To keep snakes out. But they tell you the strongest part of the house is the plumbing. So whenever they have a cyclone warning, which happens every 2 or 3 weeks through the wet season, right?
Yeah.
So we were used to it. We were used to kind of getting into the bathtub and sitting there waiting for the signal to go down from level 3 or 4 or whatever it was, right? And we'd have the radio on. So anyway, this night we're sitting in the bathtub, myself, my brother, the dog, my mum's on the floor, and my dad's wandering around the house, opening windows, closing windows. When the cyclone moves over the house, you've got to open one side to let the pressure out. Right. Yep. So, and you know where the eye of the cyclone is because everything goes quiet. So Dad was out there doing that sort of stuff and spent the night watching the house go to bits. Saw the roof come off. Heard all the glass smashing. Wake up in the morning. There's a telegraph pole through my bedroom and the main living area. And we look out the bathroom window and the house next door is just floorboards.
Wow.
Now, I mention that story because fast forward 35 years, I'm a married man with my first wife, and we had lots of arguments over the fact that she wanted to make the house look pretty, and I wouldn't let her spend money on the house.
Right.
because this little kid thought, what's the point of spending money on it?
And
It's not going to be there.
And you probably didn't realise that
Didn't
that's
realise
why you were doing that.
Didn't realise until I was getting counselling on it much later. And it actually wasn't that I was getting counselling about, but it just came up.
Yeah.
Right? And all of a sudden, the light bulb, So I phoned her anyway. At this stage, she was my ex. So I phoned her and apologised 30 years later because I didn't know why I wouldn't let her spend money on the house.
It
right?
probably
Because
made sense to her then too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So interesting. So anyway,
I've done that. Just that Cyclone Tracey. I've been in the Cyclone Tracey museum, and it's like the screaming of the corrugated iron and the ripping and the tearing.
It sounded like, because I was living on the RAF base, obviously, so it actually sounded like the runway was probably 3 or 4 kilometres away from our house, but you could hear aircraft coming and going, and it dead set sounded like there was an aircraft in the backyard.
Yeah, wow.
It was so loud.
Yeah.
But the big thing was, looking out the next morning, and there's just rubbish everywhere you can see. And I don't know if you ever saw in photos, they had these H-beam steel telegraph poles bent over at the ground, right?
Yeah.
I-beam.
Incredible.
I-beam. Telegraph poles bent over at the ground. Just rubbish everywhere.
Yeah.
And I still think there's a few hundred people missing still that they never found, right?
Really?
Yeah.
Just gone.
Yeah.
So those neighbours of yours, did they evacuate or were they in the house, or did you know what?
I think they were holding on to furniture. They were under the furniture holding on. I just can't remember, but I remember clear as a bell that floorboards. It was like stilts and just floorboards. There was nothing else there.
Yeah,
right?
wow. Just a clean sheet of floorboards.
Clean sheet of floorboards. Our house, luckily, we still had walls, right? We had no windows. We had no roof. We could see the skylight, and I think there was quite a bit of damage on one part of the house when the telegraph pole came through,
Far out. Yeah, that's wild.
Sorry, that's my phone. Yeah, so that was interesting. Anyway, after all of that, landed in the Blue Mountains and did my high school in the Blue Mountains and kind of just stayed around the Blue Mountains, Penrith area.
Because your dad then worked up at that RAF base in the mountains, didn't he?
He was at Glenbrook, yeah. He retired after 27 years with the Australian Air Force and about 17 with the Brits. So he retired as a full warrant officer with the pension and all that sort of stuff, and didn't really do much after he retired. Didn't have any hobbies, so he went downhill pretty quick. And
your mum told me that RAF base is communications.
That's
for all of it.
Yeah,
the Eastern Seaboard or the whole of Australia.
The whole of Australia.
You might be better off to talk about that.
It's a listening base for the Five Eyes, which is the US, the Brits, New Zealand, and Australia. Obviously, that Glenbrook. There's an elevator below that building. You know that white building up at Lapston.
Yeah.
Glenbrook base. There's an elevator there that goes down into the mountain.
Yeah, I wonder how far.
It's full of computers. I've been down there.
Have you?
I wasn't supposed to, but Dad was a sergeant on night shift and took me down there once. He's passed away now, so you can't sack him. He took me down there, and it was just like you could imagine a room the size of this whole house just full of computers, right? It was like you see on the movies, right? And part of my dad's job was also to go with the Prime Minister. So he was with Fraser and Hawke and Keating, right? So he survived 3 Prime Ministers, and whenever they would travel overseas, he was the communications guy with the little black box that went wherever the Prime Minister went so that he could communicate in case of...
Back to Australia or
communicate
wherever.
to everybody. The Five Eyes, right? So that phone could reach President Bush or whoever it was, right? So Dad spent a lot of time with Bob Hawke, and he used to always tell me about... Bob would be up the front of the plane and he'd come back down to see my dad, who was on the communications computer. He said, "Hey, Bill, can you put this tab bet on for me?"
Hawkeye was a real people man, wasn't he?
Yeah. My dad used to always vote Labor up until Hawke, after Keating, he never voted Labor again, I don't think.
Yeah.
He switched sides, my old man.
Yeah.
But I think the Labor back then was different to the Labor we got today.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
agree. You know,
The Labor back then was for the working class. It's
Absolutely.
not. It's not anymore.
Nah. Oh, I'm sure that Hawke era would be turning in his grave at some of the stuff
if he
that's
saw
getting
some
put
of the
forward
stuff
now,
they're doing now, yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
how
I
damaging
agree.
it is to that
agree.
working class. You know, all of these energy policies hit the working class the hardest.
Yeah, sure
You know,
do. My electricity.
It's not mean. The
I haven't got
electricity's not
solar.
means tested, is
I haven't
it?
got solar where I am at the moment. My electricity bill's doubled in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
Doubled.
Yeah. Same with ours. Ours is 50. Sorry, it's not double. With the last bill was 50% higher than that time last year.
No, mine's doubled.
And we had an extra person in the house last year.
Mine's doubled.
Yeah, wow.
Back to the Blue Mountains. Yeah,
Base,
Dad was in the Air Force there, and he was senior communications officer at Glenbrook for many years. Retired as a warrant officer in he passed away 12 years ago. So I'd say 15 years ago he retired. And he spent a lot of time travelling the world with our PMs. He was assigned to Fraser, Hawke, and then Keating. So he would be the guy that went in the plane to wherever they were going with them, carrying a little black bag, which was, you know, the bat phone to Maggie Thatcher or Ronald Reagan or whoever it was, you know.
Wow.
So I was just telling Lucas he loved Bob Hawke, right? Bob Hawke was a hero, and he tells a story if he was on the plane going to London or somewhere, and Bob would come down and just go, "Hey Bill, put these bets on at the tab for me." While he's in Air Force One, yeah.
He was a man's man, the people's man,
He
wasn't
was
he,
the
old Bob?
people's man, yeah.
Wow.
And then I think Keating came along and stuffed it all up, and you know we had 18% interest rates with Keating.
Yeah.
Because of the inflation, you know.
But he told us it was a recession we had to have.
Recession we had to have.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my dad. My mum worked all her life. She worked at the army base in Penrith, actually, when there was an army base there.
Oh, yeah.
She was the payroll lady there for a long time.
Was that near the train station?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And they've still got the old igloo huts there.
Yeah.
I don't
I've
know what
seen
they
that.
use them for now. Might
Oh,
be
I
just
don't know either.
storage. But yeah, that used to be a thriving army base, and
Yep.
that they used to have all sorts of tradesmen in there, carpenters and builders, and I think that was where it was like the army engineers unit or something, you know. So yeah, grew up, went to Springwood High, grew up in the mountains. We lived at Warramoo at the time. Became left high school year 10 and just wanted to be a motor mechanic. I loved motorbikes. I always had motorbikes. Did up a couple of old vintage bikes at one point. Loved motorbikes. Became a motor mechanic and did my apprenticeship at Kingswood Shell, the Kingswood Autoport there, near the station.
Yep.
And worked for a guy there named Bruce Quirk, who was the first guy really to start talking to me about property investment.
Okay.
My parents were always in military homes. They didn't buy a house till they were in their 50s because they were always in Air Force supplied homes, right? So my dad didn't.
It's probably something they didn't even
My dad
think
didn't
about.
have any interest at all in buying investment property. So anyway, I'm a mechanic and I'm doing my 4-year apprenticeship with Bruce Quirk at the Kingswood Garage. And whenever we didn't have enough car work, you know, car repair stuff, he would send me out to his townhouses and apartments around Penrith, and I'd mow lawns and change tap washers and stuff like that. So I was always doing odd jobs for him at his rental properties.
Yeah.
Right, and he was a big influence on me, and bought my first property in Bat Street, Penrith, when I was still working for him. I think I was a 4th-year apprentice, and between him and my mum, I think they ganged up on me really, but I wanted to buy another Harley, and they put a kibosh on that and made me buy a property. Paid $50,000 for 34 Bat Street back in early 80s, and my mum still lives there now.
So it's interesting that with some good influence, you can make some really good decisions at a young age.
Yeah, I didn't have any idea what I was doing. I went on from there. I ended up with 3 or 4 investment properties and lost all of that through a divorce and started again. So I started again at age 45 or whatever it was, and you just
They get expensive, those divorces.
very quickest way to lose $1 million is get divorced. Especially these day and ages, because doesn't take much for a property to be worth $1 million.
So, is a positive way to say that would be, how can I make $1 million? Start with $2 million and get divorced.
No, how do you make nothing?
How do you end up
Start
with
with
$1
$2
million?
million and
Start
get
with
divorced.
$2 million to get divorced.
Yeah,
Try and make it work.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
So anyway, my property journey started back then when I was working for Bruce Quirk, and just through sheer luck, I suppose, just bought properties, bought and sold, bought, renovated, bought and hung on to, bought, lost in a divorce, whatever, know. So had a lot of experience buying and selling without really knowing what I was doing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I had a divorce in 2012, and that was where I lost the three investment properties and the family home. Had a divorce and ended up surprisingly getting full custody of the kids.
Okay.
Totally unexpected. I did not expect it. But the ex-wife was diagnosed with some mental health issues,
Yeah.
including a thing called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. So the court gave me the kids, who at the time, this was 2012, so at the time the kids were 10 and 9. So they're 21 and 19 now.
Yeah. Same age as my kids.
Yeah.
I didn't realise they were the same age.
Yeah.
With
So
that,
I ended.
with that Munchausen's thing, there's 2 different types, isn't there?
Yeah,
There's the-
Munchausen syndrome is when the individual has the health issues or perceived health issues, right? Munchausen syndrome by proxy is when they put it onto the kids.
Wow.
Right, so my kids grew up learning never to eat food from anyone else but their mum.
Yeah.
Homeschooled.
What do you mean What do you mean you put it onto the kids? What does that? What do you mean?
So just imagine it like it's a mother who
This is a mental illness.
cannot let go of her children and has to control everything
Right.
within the environment.
Right.
Friends, food, education, right? And it does. In severe cases, there can be physical harm as well. Thankfully, that didn't happen in my case. It was all about control. Daddy's not allowed to feed you because he doesn't know what you might, he might poison you. You're not allowed to go to school because you've got, severe immune system issues. We're just all fabricated in her head.
So how were you dealing with it? So you obviously saw this stuff going on and thought, "Fuck, this isn't right."
The first 5 or 6 years, I thought, wow, she's super mum. Right, we would go
Just taking care of the kids.
We would go out, and she would have all the food prepared in little containers, all the water measured.
Yep.
And it was only after a few years when it was really, for me, it was when homeschooling. Okay. You have to go to the government, get a certificate to learn about how to do that, which she did. And then after 2 years, I was coming home from work. At that time, I had an engineering business with 40 people employed. And I'd come home from work and the 3 of them were still in bed watching movies.
So there was no real homeschooling
Yeah.
going on. It was just her way of having that control over the children.
Control. Yeah, no swimming, no sports, nothing. And the court ended up giving me the kids. And at that time, I had this engineering business in Wetherill Park building special purpose trucks. I had 40 people working for me. And it was a very successful business. State emergency service, police rescue, all the energy companies, the railway, all of the big contracts for special purpose trucks, right? So the dealer would deliver the truck, the bare chassis to us, and we'd build the body.
Yeah.
And we'd mass produce the floors, the cabinets. We'd have all the wiring harnesses pre-made. We were kind of mass customizing truck bodies. Instead of just building one, we'd have a contract for Westtrac with 150 for the year. So we'd plan it all out. We'd do all the wiring harnesses, build all the floors. Vehicle would arrive. 2 days later, signage, paint, it's out the door. And the dealers loved us.
Yeah. Quick turnaround times.
Because normally you'd send it to the bodybuilder, it'd sit there for 4 weeks. It'd get a body, then it'd go to the painter, sit there for 2 weeks. Then it's got to go to the sign writer and the electrician. The whole thing would take 3 months.
Yeah.
You know,
but normally what happens is the bodybuilder, in the meantime, is telling the dealer it should be finished next week.
Yeah, right. So I was in that
my
industry.
experience.
I was lucky because I had business partners that were very smart.
Yep.
Indonesian Chinese who were in the truck bodybuilding business in Indonesia. And one of the guys on their board was a chairman of Honda Indonesia. And those guys came over here and helped me establish this production facility that was based on the Toyota way, you know, Kanban systems and all this. So I knew every nut and bolt in the warehouse.
Wow.
Right. And
What's the Japanese saying? There's a saying that they use
for Kanban?
Is it Kanban?
The Toyota way.
Yeah, there's a
great book, by the way.
digress. But yeah, there's
anyone that wants to get into any kind of manufacturing business, fantastic book. Fantastic book.
Yeah, right. That's a good one.
So we were in 2012.
What was it called?
Amplus Auto Body, AMP.
No. What's the book called? Yeah,
The Toyota Way.
The Toyota Way.
The Toyota Way. So we followed those principles, and went from sort of turning over 1 or 2 million a year to 15, 16 million a year pretty quickly.
Yep.
And after the divorce, I realised I couldn't keep that business because I had the kids. I had to pick them up after school. So I ended up selling that business to a public company, took 3 months off and didn't know what to do. Obviously, I had money in the bank because I just sold my business. So I took 3 months off, just looked after the kids, and then one day I thought, I better do some work, better find out what I'm going to do. Went and Googled franchises in Australia. And the number one franchise in 2013 was Smartline.
Yeah, right.
Mortgage brokers.
Yeah.
And, mortgage broker. I had, like I said, I had a few investment properties. I kind of knew what I was doing, buying and selling. And I always went to a mortgage broker in Newcastle who helped me with all my car loans and everything. I phoned him up and said, it's great. Yeah, you'd be great at it, Steve. So I phoned Smartline, went and saw them, and I said to them, Smartline's now part of Mortgage Choice, but we're all the same group as realestate.com.au. Okay, so we're all part of that public company, that group. So I went and said to Smartline at the time, can I work from home? Yes. How much does it cost to get started? It was about 15 to 20 grand. How much money can I make? As much as you want. Do I have to have a shop front? No. You can have one. You don't have to have one. It's great. So I thought, that sounds all right. So I paid the money, did the diploma of finance, and kicked off back in early 2014.
Yeah.
And it's a great business. I love it. I love helping people get ahead. I love talking to people about properties and,
What about the freedom to
I work
choose
from
your own
home.
adventure every week?
Yeah, I work from home. I
work as much as you
much
want.
or as little as there is. A lot of the time as a mortgage broker, you're waiting for clients to give you documents.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden it happens, right? You get 3 or 4 all at once, and you're busy for you're busy putting it all together. Especially when people are buying, because you've got that time constraint. Okay, we're under contract now; it's got to happen. Refinancing's not so critical unless we're looking at a cash back, and you've got a time limit. You've got to settle before the end of the month or something like that. But it's pretty good. Yeah.
So Steve, who, just backing up a little bit, who shaped you? Have you had some good influences and maybe even some negative influences that then shaped your personality and shaped who you are? Have you had some good men in your life who sort of
Bruce
shaped
Quirk,
you?
I mentioned. Well, look, my parents, hard workers. My dad always had 2 jobs.
Yep.
He would work for the Air Force, and then his beer money would be the Caltex service station at Warramoo.
Yeah, wow.
You know, he would always work nights or cleaning pubs. My dad cleaned the Pioneer Tavern for years and years and years. So that was what he called his beer and cigarette money.
Yeah. What else did you learn off your dad? Like,
Fishing.
I'm just imagining a guy who's worked for two air forces must have some traits which pass down to you. You know, like loyalty.
I can polish boots.
Stuff. Yeah,
I can polish boots.
Yeah.
I can iron shirts. And I can.
You love the smell of starch.
I can cook a good meal. Right.
Yeah.
Growing up, myself and my brother did all the household duties because mum and dad were working. So dad had the mindset that the dinner was on the table when mum walked in the door.
Yeah.
Right.
So he ran a tight ship.
He ran a tight ship. My brother and I would take turns of washing up or peeling the spuds and carrots and having them, you know, all cooked and ready for mum when mum got home. And even if my dad was working shift work, that's what we had to do.
Yeah.
You know, if that wasn't done when mum got home, watch out.
Someone was copping
Watch
it.
out next time dad gets home.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
He'd wake you up in the middle of the night and say, "Hey, don't do that again."
Yeah.
You know.
And so you guys just knew, don't fuck around.
Don't.
'Cause
It was,
these days,
it was
I mean-
just there was no violence, but it was a disciplined ship.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
was a disciplined
How did he
ship.
maintain that, and how did he, get that across without the?
I think it was just his presence. I think it was just his.
Was
presence.
it clear expectations?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing with kids.
Yeah.
And I know, like, when I've been managing people, you can't expect somebody to meet your expectations if you didn't lay them out
Yeah.
clearly.
And
If you
and
say,
back
"I'll
in-
just go and see how you go,"
yeah, and when
and
I
then you
was
turn up and you go, "Oh, you've done it wrong," and
Yeah.
you haven't told that person what you expected,
yeah.
you can't really expect them to live up to your
No.
hopes and
The big
dreams.
difference back then, I suppose, is there was no internet. The biggest challenge for me was coming in from the backyard when the lights went off because we were always playing footy or cricket in the backyard.
Yeah.
My brother, my mates, the neighbours, we'd have a footy and we'd be playing backyard footy until the lights went out.
But I think even now, so even though that's a factor now, so anyone bringing up kids now has to deal with that. If you still haven't set any clear expectations for your kids,
100%.
then they can sit on the internet or they can stay out late or they can do whatever they want. You've still got to, if you want people to work as a team, it's a bit like playing football. If you're playing football and you haven't told anyone their positions, then you're not going to win the game.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, you've
So-
got to have those clear expectations.
And your mum and dad they would have had to be on the same page. No.
Yeah. No, I never really ever saw them argue. I think they would go into the room, close the door,
Yeah.
and sort it out between themselves before they maintain a solid front.
Yeah.
It was always, don't backchat your mum. Make sure. We had a little list of things to do when we got home. Whether it was peeling the veggies or putting a load of washing in or whatever. We were kind of self-sufficient by the age of 12, I think.
Yep. So Bruce Quirk and then anyone else?
Bruce Quirk, he's my first employer. I suppose my martial arts instructors were a big influence. I had a bike accident when I was 17, a motorbike accident, and fractured my tib and fib. And the doctor, the orthopaedic surgeon, Dr. Bray, I remember his name, he said, "You need to go and do some judo or something, because I've got one leg that's a bit shorter than the other. It's actually an inch shorter."
You should be fine walking around at Murrarundai then.
Yeah, I don't have to go as far. No, it actually gives me a bit of trouble. It gives my ankle a bit of trouble because it's not perfectly straight. So my left foot's kind of on an angle.
Yeah.
Anyway, so from that, I got stuck into judo, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, boxing at sort of like age 17. And my jiu-jitsu instructor, Terry Healy, had a class up in the Blue Mountains, and I did that for years and years with him. Got my black belt at 26, and then
That's in jiu-jitsu.
yeah, in jiu-jitsu.
So that was very early on
Yeah.
for Australian jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, so this was before the UFC and the MMA, and before Gracie Jiu-Jitsu really had taken over.
Yeah.
So
Was it
what I was
Brazilian
doing was
jiu-jitsu?
no, what I was doing is Japanese
Okay.
traditional jiu-jitsu. We did some groundwork, but it wasn't really the big emphasis. It was more like your judo kind of throws, but with kicking and punching as well, right? So that Terry Healy was a big influence, because I remember when I got to my brown belt, which was kind of like maybe 7 or 8 years in. So it was 26, started at 17, 26, got my first black belt. So Terry said to me, this was at a time in the 80s when every martial arts school thought they had the secret recipe,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. We're the best. You know, go and learn Shaolin Kung Fu. We've got the secret magic touch, right? Everyone was like that back then, right?
I think it was not till they all got in the octagon they worked out who had it.
Well, it wasn't till the UFC that people thought, oh shit, I might be a good kicker, but I better learn to grapple as well, right? So that just turned the whole thing on its head. But I remember in the 80s, Terry Healy said to me, I'm not going to give you your black belt until you go and get another belt in another style.
Wow. That's forward thinking.
That was forward thinking. So I went and spent a bit of time doing Zenchi Ryu and Taekwondo, got a couple of other belts, you know, improved my kicking and punching style. And then after a couple of years, he let me get my black belt.
And did you have any competition?
Yeah, we had competitions. Yeah, we used to go around quite a few clubs in New South Wales. So we'd go away for a competition and do that and do demonstrations and all of that. I've got lots of photos and videos and stuff. So he was a big influence in my life. And then I guess after that would probably be Greg Murray, who was the mortgage broker in Penrith.
Yeah. Who was our mortgage broker.
That I took over from. He
you
retired and I took over from him.
Yeah.
Basically, he spent a lot of time with me the first 2 or 3 years.
He was a lovely fella.
Not getting paid for it, right?
Yeah, right. Really?
Not getting paid for it, but because I came from an engineering background, I didn't really understand banking and finance that well, even though I had my own loans. It's very different when you're doing it for someone else.
Yeah.
But he spent a lot of time helping me get established, and then when he retired, I basically took over his clients and. Yeah,
and so and he probably did that. He wanted to see you be successful at it.
Yeah, and he wanted to make sure his clients were looked after.
Yeah,
it's always been about his clients.
Yeah,
and my clients. You know, I mean, we do things without, you know, it. Sure, we've got to get paid, but that's not what drives us to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's job satisfaction, right?
It's job satisfaction. It's helping someone, and then it's 2 years later getting a phone call from their daughter or their son or someone at work saying,
"That's
hey,
when you know you've done a good job."
Yeah, hey, can you help us out? We spoke to Lucas and you looked after him. Can you help us again? That's so fulfilling.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's pretty rare these days, and you can really tell when someone's genuine and when they really want to help you out, and they're in it not just for the money.
Yeah.
But when I've spoken to you, like I can tell, like even though we know each other, but you're talking in a professional way to me, but it's not coming across like it's for the money or you're doing it as a business. Like I feel like you're passionate about it, and you really know what you're talking about, and you want the best outcome for me.
Yeah, 100%. I've always believed that in businesses. There's plenty of business out there for everyone if you just look after customers, and the money will come.
Yeah, and if you want people to make the decision when it's right for them too.
Yeah.
So give them plenty of advice, walk with them through the process, and then if you've been the one who's helped people out throughout that whole process, the money will come, the business will come, but it doesn't feel like business. It just feels like it feels like I'm just helping you. I'm just helping you buy that property that you wanted. I'm just helping you buy that next house because we just help each other all the time.
And education. You know, I try and educate my clients. Doesn't matter what they're doing, but I try and educate them financially and about the property market, right? Because I have seen cases where people go off on their own and buy an apartment somewhere, and 5 years later it's worth the same price they paid for it.
Yeah. I think when I did that education with Peter, he's calling those the dogs. you've bought a dog.
Yeah.
It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
It's just there.
Yeah.
It doesn't go up in value. You know, it's just holding you down.
Yeah. Which the education's really important, I think, especially for investment. I mean, if it's owner occupied, you wanna buy somewhere where your kids are going to be happy, where you're happy with the schools,
Yep.
you're happy with the services. But I find a lot of times people can't afford to buy where they want.
Yeah.
You know, and that might open the door or maybe interest them in getting an investment property. Or, you know, you get people that want to buy an investment property in a certain area, but I can see straight away it's not going to be a good investment just because of the price they're paying and the return on investment, right?
Yep.
So to get that capital growth and that cash flow in balance, you need to look at a lot more than just the location.
So what are some of the mistakes then that you see people making time and time again? Or you see them often.
That one I mentioned where someone just bought an off the plan apartment in Cairns. You know, they had to wait 2 years for it to be built. And I've got nothing against Cairns. Again, let's talk about the property market suburb by suburb.
Yeah.
Postcode by postcode, right?
Yeah.
It's not one big property market.
Yeah. Because even Sydney's not one property market.
No, it's thousands of little property markets. And you could even break it down street by street because within certain postcodes, there's certain streets that are better than others in terms of capital growth or rental return because they might have a higher percentage of owner-occupied.
Yep.
Right? And if you've got a higher percentage of owner-occupied, the gardens are nice, the gutters are painted, the people are improving their house like your landscaping you're doing. So that lifts everything, you know, and then you've got vacancy rates. It used to be 10 years ago, if you found a suburb with 3% vacancy rate, that was pretty good. Right, but now right around the country, it's less than 1%.
Yeah.
Vacancy rate, which means there's a lot of demand for rental property. So I think now's a great time to be looking at investments.
Yeah. Yeah. So that vacancy rates change the equation of where you can buy. Whereas in the past, perhaps that suburb might not have been a great investment. Now it is because if you're trying to rent those houses out, the vacancy rate's at 1%.
And it might be just the public transport has changed, or there's a new school or a new hospital. All of those things have an impact on where you should buy, and that's part of the education that I want to be able to give people.
Yeah,
you know, we're actually all of the mortgage choice brokers in the Penrith area. We've all got together. We've all worked out an education seminar, and we're going to do one in October.
Yeah,
at Panthers.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So I'll send you guys the link.
Yeah, we'd love to come along.
Yeah, definitely.
Just for the education and invite anyone
and bring
else.
my kids.
Yeah.
You know, because the earlier that you can get some of this stuff understood.
Yeah.
Because it's not because some of it's a little bit like speaking another language initially when if you haven't had anything to do with property.
It is.
And people start talking about clocks and cycles and all these factors got to go in there.
Cool off period, you know, like
Yep.
Even that, people don't quite understand what it is.
All the terminology.
All the contractual terminologies is new. And it is confusing to people, especially the first time they do it. You know, where are we in the process? What comes next?
Yep.
Am I waiting for the bank or can I sign the contract?
Yeah.
Where are we in the cycle? You know, so obviously I try and get people to get a pre-approval first, which basically is an application to the bank, and we get a letter from the bank say, yes, we agreed to lend you the money, subject to your employment, giving us a tax return, whatever it is, right? Subject to, we always try and get that pre-approval because, you know, worst thing is someone signs a contract for 700 and then you find out they can only borrow 600.
Yep. So can I throw up another mistake, which we spoke about sort of before we got rolling, which I think is important, was discussing, I need to get my first home buyer's grant before I can buy a property. You know, and then you're missing this opportunity. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure.
You know, and explain that?
At the moment, there's various different first home buyer grants. There's a federal grant, which is called the First Home Guarantee, which basically means you only need a 5% deposit, right? In the good old days, you would pay mortgage insurance because you don't have 20%, right?
Yep.
So you'd pay mortgage insurance, which is an insurance that covers the bank in case you default, right? Or you would get mum and dad to be the guarantor,
Yep.
right? Now the government will do that for you as a first-home buyer. So you only need 5%.
Any strings attached to that?
There's an income cap and there's a property cap.
Okay.
So in New South Wales metropolitan area, so Sydney, Newcastle, I think the cap is 900,000 on the property.
Okay.
Right, and the income cap is 125 for an individual, and I think 250 for a couple, something like that.
Doesn't really leave you for many options in a 900,000 mark, does it?
No, not in Sydney.
But I suppose it's trying to target that first home, the very first purchase, get in the market.
Yeah. So and then there's a state government grant, which is the stamp duty exemption. Again, it has caps. So up to 800, you basically get a reduction in stamp duty. Over 800, you pay the full stamp duty.
Yep.
So let's say with those two things, you would typically save 40,000. So the government's helping you out by 40,000 to buy your first home. Right now, if you can't afford to buy that home where you want, right? Well, I think it would make sense to at least get into the market and buy an investment property.
And sorry, Steve. So those two schemes are for owner occupied only.
Yes, correct.
Yep.
Correct.
So now you're talking about if you can't
buy where you work and where you want to live, like Penrith.
So you're not going to be able to occupy it.
First home buyers that make, they've got 150 between them, they're not going to be able to borrow $1 million, right? There's basically a rule of 6 times your gross income.
Yep.
Roughly 5.5 to 6 times. So if you earn 100 grand, typically you could borrow 600.
Yep.
Right. That's an old rule of thumb. It's not 100% accurate, but
it's a guide. Yeah.
Right. So if you're going to buy your first property and the government's going to help you with stamp duty and the first home guarantee, effectively the government's going to cover 40 grand, right? But you can buy an investment property. Let's say, for example, Lithgow, Armidale, regional area, pay 400 for a property, get 10% increase every year for the next 3 years. You're going to make 120 grand out of that property. Right?
Yep.
So you got to think about, okay, do I wait and buy my first property to save the 40 grand, or do I get into the market now? There's an argument for get into the market now.
Yeah, just get into it somewhere else.
There really
is affordable.
Like I told you the story. I've got a client who's 26 or 27 now, forklift driver. Got 3 investment properties. 2 of them are positively geared, and because of the growth we've had over the last 3 years in regional, he's basically doubled his assets.
Yeah,
he's only 27.
That's such a good story.
And like he couldn't afford to buy in Penrith at the time, so he bought his first one in Lithgow for like 190. It's now worth 390. Bought one in Wodonga, I think 270. It's worth 450 now. Yeah. And then bought a third one in Launceston.
Yeah.
And I think that Launceston one he bought was during COVID. He still had his job. He was a storeman for Woolies.
Yeah.
Right? So he wasn't impacted negatively. In fact, I think he got a lot of overtime that year. So 27's got 3 investment properties.
Yeah. That and doubled in price.
Works
at Woolies.
And
I mean, you don't have to be.
No.
No,
you don't need to be some high-flying corporate job.
No.
To get started and get going.
On the other hand, I've got other clients that are in a really good job. I've got one young lady who's a physiotherapist. She's got a really good job. And she's sitting on the fence now waiting for prices to go down because someone told her property prices in Penrith are going to drop 20%. So she's sitting on the sideline waiting.
Just because Channel 7 or someone tells you.
But I can tell you, I got some stats because I was at a conference last
give
week.
Us your stats. So is this sort of what the property market's looking like in the next 12 months?
This is where we are today.
Yep.
Where we are today. So this is a 3-year window. So we're talking about COVID and the recent 12 months worth of rate rises.
Because has there been some, like compared to if you look at the last 10 years, did COVID cause some unusual changes in the
Yes.
property market?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which you would then, like, if you're trying to look at the next 3 or 5 years,
Yeah.
are you sort of excluding some of the things that happened because it was kind of a unique situation?
Yeah. There's been two very unique factors, probably three.
Yep.
But two very unique factors. But let's just talk about the past 3 years. So where we are today, national values are up 14.8, so 15% from where they were 3 years ago.
So
Sydney,
national values, what do they include?
house value,
House value, okay.
house value,
Yeah.
house, apartment, everything across the board, 15%
Yeah, wow.
from 3 years ago.
So even if you're in Cobar, you know,
Well,
a house.
like
That's just
I mean,
average.
It's an
like
average,
I
but
said, this is an average,
Yep.
right? So you're going to have some
Yep.
places that are up 30%.
Yep.
Some places maybe up 2%.
Yep.
So we're talking an average of 14.8. Sydney, 7.7. Again, that's an average. You might have some places that have gone up a lot more and some places that
Yeah, but we're talking about in 10 years in a capital city like Sydney, it averages around 10%.
yeah, 9.
And you're saying 7.7 in 3.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll
From an
probably
already pretty high base.
it'll probably continue the 40-year average, which is 9.9. You know,
Yeah.
some years you go up 15, some years you go up 7.
Yeah.
But for the last 40 years, it's been 9.9. It's 9 above 9.5 for all the major capitals.
Yep.
Regional areas, it's kind of average 7 to 9.
Yep.
The average 40 years right now.
Yep.
The last 3 years, regional's gone up 31%.
That's massive.
Right. So again, back to my story with the young fella, 27-year-old who's just bought 3.
I know. I wish I had 3 houses in Lithgow.
Over the last 3 years, right?
Yep.
So and we talk about supply and demand. Now and this is not just me, I'm paraphrasing what the head economist for HSBC Bank told me a few days ago at the conference. Supply and demand is the key driver. Okay, so for the past 3 years we had COVID, so immigration stopped.
Yep.
Foreign students stopped.
So demand came off.
Demand came off, but we had people working from home and baby boomers selling up in the capital cities and moving to regional.
Yep.
That's what's driven the growth in regional.
Yep. That's what gives you 31%.
That's what's given you
Yep.
31%. Two things: people working from home, having a lifestyle change, so they're selling in Sydney, selling in Brisbane, selling in Melbourne, moving
Yep.
to regional areas, much lower debt, maybe paid off the debt,
Yeah.
working from home.
Yeah.
So that's been a big factor. The other thing is the baby boomers, people my age, 60, 65, now they're looking to downsize and saying, okay, well, we can sell the Sydney property for $2 million, we can buy in Port Stephens, have a nice ocean view for $1 million or 700. You know, so there's a lot of that happening as well. Now, put on top of that, the end of COVID, and we'll talk about the inflation and interest rates a little bit separately, but as far as the supply and demand's concerned, end of COVID, no immigration, no students, all that's back on now. So what the government has done is basically double it so we can catch up.
Yeah. Yeah, the tap's on full bore.
Taps on full bore with immigration, and that's where all the demand's coming from for rental properties.
Yeah.
That's why the vacancy rate's gone from 3 to 1.
Yeah, well, some of these
A lot of pressure on rental
inspections, there's like 30, there'll be 30 people turn up.
Yeah.
And,
So
and I know, like, you know, because I work on those rental properties, and I've got my real estate property managers going, when can you get this one done? Because we've already rented it out.
Yeah.
Like it's half destroyed.
Demand. Yeah.
And they've already got tenants ready to go in.
Yeah.
Can I just hurry up and get it finished?
Yeah.
you know?
Prices are going through the roof
Yeah.
Yeah.
because of the demand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, how are they affording this?
Yeah.
You know, what
Yeah.
cost of living.
So now I believe certainly the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, now is a good time to be an investor, get into the market. I doubt property prices are going backwards. I really doubt it because of the supply and demand thing. It's not going to happen. Interest rates are not going to go back to 2. They're back where they were 10 years ago. I think they're back where they should be, to be honest.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people just got used to cheap money. A lot of people bought into the market at 2%, and now they've got to face, okay, it might be 6 now. How do we do it? I've had one customer move back home with mum and dad.
Yeah.
I've had another customer move his girlfriend in, and he's put her on the loan. So there's all of that stuff people are doing to just try and hang on to the property, right?
Yeah.
So the market outlook is really strong because of supply and demand.
Yep.
Building approvals are lagging. There is a lot of building approvals in at council, and council is the bottleneck. The state government releases the land, and then it goes to council to get development approval, and that's where the bottleneck is.
So how does it work, mate? There's a, because the majority of, there's obviously there's state owned land, but then a lot of the stuff that gets developed, it's a big old farm.
Yeah,
That's all the farms around the outskirts of Sydney have been bought
in
out.
Kellyville. I've got clients there that signed a contract with a developer. Now they could stay in the house for 2 years, but they got paid 50% of the money up front, and then a certain percentage for the next 2 years. So they'll have all their money for their property sold in 2 years, but then they've got to move out. So they get 2 years free rent.
Yep.
And they're going to move out, and the developers bought like 300 homes, and they're going to knock it all down and make apartments, medium density apartments, right?
Jeez, they'll pack them in there. Yeah, wow.
So there's all of that going on. There's people putting in townhouses, rezoning their land, buying land that council has already zoned. You can put a townhouse on it or a duplex.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people doing that sort of stuff. A lot of first home buyers, and again, the government grants that first home buyers is driving prices up as well. That's
how does that work?
Well, you think if you only need a 5% deposit, you can buy sooner, and you've got more capacity, right? If you're not paying for stamp duty,
So just that capitalist mindset.
Look, if the
the
government,
developers and the home, the package providers just up the price.
yeah. Well, it's bringing more people into the market sooner, which is the supply and demand.
Yeah.
So it's that.
So there's just more demand.
That's filling the supply side of the equation, right? So you've got two, So
it doesn't address the supply problem because there's not more houses on the market.
Yeah.
There's just more demand.
More buyers.
So the demand goes up, so price goes
more
up.
More buyers. Yeah, that's right. So that's filling that part of the equation, which again holds prices up.
Yep.
Because if you look at before all of these government schemes, the only way for first home buyers to get in was to either save the 20%, or get mum and dad to help. And a fact of life is a lot of parents are reluctant to do that.
So maybe explain how that guarantor scenario would work. If let's say mum and dad said, "Yep, okay, we're prepared to, we trust you. You work hard. You've got good incomes. You're settled."
Yeah. So if mum and dad have got the equity in their home, you can go to the bank, and there's two ways you can do it. You can either go back to mum and dad's bank and say, "Hey, we want to use this property as security to purchase the kids' property," right? So the bank puts the two properties together and then determines the loan-to-value ratio, which is the LVR, and as long as it's below 80 with both properties, so effectively, mum and dad's property guarantees the kids' deposit and the stamp duty.
Okay.
So if mum and dad have got a property worth $1 million, their current loan's $500, the bank's probably going to want a second registered mortgage for $120. Right, so now mum and dad are on the hook for $120, which was the deposit and the stamp duty for the kids.
Oh, so is there then one mortgage? So mum and dad have got a mortgage?
Yeah, mum and dad have got a mortgage. Say their mortgage was $500.
Yep.
The kids have got the mortgage for the full amount.
For the new property?
For the new property.
And so it's a $1 million buy price.
Yep.
And they get a mortgage for $1 million?
Yeah, if they can afford, if the borrowing capacity allows it. But essentially, the guarantee means the bank's now got two properties.
Yep.
Right, which means they've got more security, which allows the kids not to have the 20% deposit.
So they don't even have to pay any deposit.
They still,
Or-
in most cases, the banks still want 5% to show good conduct on
Yep.
your savings.
Okay.
Yeah.
There are a couple of banks that will do it without,
Yeah.
but then the guarantee property needs to be with that bank. For
Yep.
example, Bank West will do it with no deposit from the kids, but they want both security properties.
Steve, what do they call that when the two properties are then tied together?
Cross-secured or
Cross-secured.
cross-collateralised?
Yeah, cross collateral. Yeah, that's what.
So they're putting those together. So say for instance, these guys couldn't afford the mortgage anymore. Shit went downhill. They've got the parents' house
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So what
They
what would
they
they do
would
then?
they would send a letter if the kids go into default. They'd send a letter and they'd basically send it to both parties.
Yep.
Say the kids, you know, you've got 30 days or 60 days, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
You've got 30 to 60 days, and if you don't, then we'll call in the collateral, which means they can foreclose
On both houses?
on both. They probably send a letter to the parents saying, you know, you need to
help you get
you need to fund this,
Mm.
right? If the kids are in arrears and they've defaulted and they can't do it, they're just going to have to sell the property, or the bank will foreclose. I think they'll let you go 3 months to sort it out, but you've got to sort it out. And if they foreclose and they can't get the full value and enough to cover mum and dad's portion, then mum and dad are up for that.
Yeah.
So
And
their
the
house
problem
might
with
have to be
that,
sold.
and mum and dad will probably come back to me and say, "Hey, we need to borrow 130,000."
And refinance.
Yeah, they'll refinance or get a top up for their loan. But the problem with all of that is if you let it get to that stage, the banks will add on their legal fees.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, they don't lose, do they?
No, you don't. So you don't want to get to that
No.
stage if you can't afford the property. Work out what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Don't be over emotional about it. If you got to
Sell it.
sell it, you got to sell
Get
it.
out. Yeah.
Don't get to the point where you're 3 months in and the bank gets legal, because once the bank gets legal, that's just going to cost you more. So if you get out of it, and I think most banks will allow you to go onto interest only for a while, or they'll allow you to miss 1 or 2 payments and hardship, but that will all go on your credit report.
Yeah.
If you go on hardship, it's on your credit report, and that might prevent you from borrowing in the future.
Yep. Yep.
I suppose when you're at that point, you don't really care. You just want to survive, really.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the key
Look,
is
and-
to be having the conversations
Yeah, and look,
well before that.
Yeah, look, I was forced to sell a property when the interest rates went up to 18%. I couldn't afford it. I was still a motor mechanic at the time. I think I was working for the NRMA doing roadside service up in the mountains.
Yep.
And interest rates went to 18%, and I just got out. I knew I couldn't afford it. I got
Yeah.
out, started saving again, bought in, that one was in Blaxland, ended up buying up in Hazelbrook because it was 200 grand cheaper and I could afford it at the
Yeah.
time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just got to do what you do.
So, mate, the great Australian dream
Yep,
of home ownership
Yeah.
and
definitely.
being a first home buyer, is it alive and well?
It is, mate. Yeah.
Has it changed?
Well, apart from property prices going up, no. I've got this week. I've got 2 first-home buyers, a refinance, and an investment property purchase. So, look, 50% of what I'm doing this week is first-home buyers.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And so what are the key steps you need to take if you're let's say you're a young couple?
Yep.
And you've just decided, you know, Dave, I really love you. Spacco, I really love you. We want to buy a property.
Yeah.
You know, what should we do?
5% deposit.
Yep.
Yeah, put that in a bank account. Good idea. It should be in joint names.
Yep. So the bank account and
Not
joint
not
names.
in, not in mum and dad's offset account,
Yep.
right? It's got to be in your own name to show that genuine savings over a 3-month period.
Yep.
That's the first thing. The second thing I think is, as long as you're both full-time employed, or casual, most banks will say you've got to be in the job for 12 months. Full-time employed, permanent employed, as long as you're off probation,
Yep.
pretty much good to go.
Yeah. Okay.
Which probation might be 3 months or 6 months, but as long as you're off probation. The banks will accept probation if you changed jobs recently, but you've got a history in the same job in the same industry for 2 or 3 years.
Yep.
Right. So the banks will be a little bit flexible on that, but not if you say you're going from working in Woolies to working in a chemist. That's you've got to sit out your 6 months.
Yep. So owner occupier, utilising the first home buyers schemes, get a joint bank account together, get that
Joint
savings
bank account,
record.
5%.
5%.
Talk to a mortgage broker about how much you can borrow.
Yep.
Based on your income.
Yep.
Mortgage broker can do that fairly quickly, based on a couple of pay slips. How much credit cards, car loans. What do you got? I can work out how much you can borrow. Because if you want to buy owner occupied and the property suburb that you want to buy in is $1 million, but you can only borrow 600, that plan's not going to work. So that might be okay. Well, where else can we buy? Do we want to buy owner occupied, or do we want to go with investment first?
And then so then what would the steps be if we make that decision and go, yep, that's how the numbers stack up?
Yep.
We want to get in the property market, but we're gonna invest.
Yep.
But we're still a young couple.
Yep.
How much money do we? What percentage of purchase price do we need to get together?
10%.
10%.
10%, but you will pay mortgage insurance.
Yep.
20% plus stamp duty, and there is no mortgage insurance. But the difference between the lender policy is owner occupied, we can get away with 5%. Investment, we need 10%.
Okay.
Plus the stamp duty, which is actually like 12%. And again, I look at the LMI cost, which is the mortgage insurance cost, offset that against the gain in the property over a 2-year period.
Yeah.
Right? If the mortgage insurance cost is going to cost you 15, but you think, hey, we might be able to make 60 grand profit in 2 years, it's a no-brainer.
Absolutely.
A lot of people are very worried about, okay, I don't want to pay the stamp duty, I want to do the first home buy thing. That's great. Or I don't want to pay the mortgage insurance when I'm buying an investment property. But hey, it really comes down to the numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. So try not to be emotional about it. If you're investing, get the emotion out of it.
Yeah. Get your education done. Most good mortgage brokers will have an education program, whether they will provide it to the investor or whether they introduce someone else. You've just got to then be aware that if your mortgage broker introduces you to someone, you just need to be careful about the stock that they're going to offer you, right? So this is where your education becomes important, and I think the most riskiest investment at the moment is off-the-plan apartments. Mm-hmm. Because as a mortgage broker, if you come to me and you say, I want to buy this off-the-plan apartment and it's not going to be ready for a year, I can't get you a loan now.
No.
We have to wait until it's completed.
It can't be a formal approval.
And the bank values it. The bank's not going to give you a loan until they value it, and it needs to be completed. So what the value is going to be in 12 years, in 12 months, hopefully it's gone up.
Yep.
Who knows? Who knows? In my 9 years of being a mortgage broker, the only 2 real problems I've had have been both off the plan apartments.
Yeah, right.
Well, I couldn't finance it. I couldn't finance it because one was in Brisbane, and it was in an apartment block of 370 apartments, and that's what the banks say is high density, and it just happened to be a suburb where there was a lot of investors. So the banks look at it from a risk perspective, and they just said, no, we're not going to fund this. And I tried every bank. In fact, that client came to me through another mortgage broker who couldn't finance it.
Wow.
Right, and he came to me because there's mortgage brokers talk to each other, and he knew I could access Liberty Financial, but he couldn't.
Yeah.
Because I was accredited, and that was the last chance, and they said no.
Wow.
So this was an apartment in Brisbane. The young man worked in Darwin, and he had a good job, state government, but he lost his 45 grand.
Ouch.
Wow.
Yeah.
That'd hurt.
Yeah, it would hurt a lot.
45
And
grand.
the only other occasion I've had a problem was a client of mine who bought in the East Quarter at Penrith. You know, the East Quarter, the
Down near
apartments
Panthers
right
Stadium.
next to Panthers, right?
Yeah.
Now, what happened there was some of those apartments broke the ceiling. And what I mean by that is every other apartment in that area in Penrith, the maximum price was $550. But in that first development, some of those apartments sold for $690. So the people paid $690 off the plan, and when the bank went to value it, the valuer had no comparisons, right?
Right.
So he valued it at $550. They paid $690.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Right. So the bank won't allow you to break the ceiling in a first sale from a developer.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Now, if we look at those apartments, some of them have sold on the market.
Yep.
The whole valuation
Now there's
process
a history.
is different.
There's a comparison.
The banks have to have a comparison. They have to have 2 or 3 comparisons from within the area. So if you're buying off the plan in what looks like a really nice development, that's great, but you just have to be aware how the banks value it. And they might come back and say, okay, well, we approved you for 80, but now we're only going to give you 65.
Yeah.
You've got to come up with the difference.
Where the education comes in.
That's where the education comes in.
Before you make these decisions.
Yeah. So my guiding philosophy for all of my clients is, whether it's owner occupied or investment, is land.
Yeah. Yep.
House and land package. House and land package. Owner occupied, I mean established house and land, right? There's no benefit to having a brand new home other than the fact that you've got a brand new home. But if you're an investor,
You put it on Instagram.
if you're an investor and it's a brand new home, no one else has lived in it, there's significant tax and depreciation benefits.
Yeah.
So again, that's part of the education. So if you buy an established home, currently under the ATO guidelines, you can only get a depreciation on any repairs and maintenance you do, any new equipment.
Which is 3/5 of not much.
Yeah, if you renovate a kitchen, you might get some of that back. But if it's a brand new home no one's lived in, you get a lot more depreciation back, which effectively means, if you look at it over the 30-year term, effectively means the government's helped you with maybe 25 or 30% of the whole loan.
Wow.
Yeah, by reducing your tax.
By reducing your tax.
Yeah.
Right? But that only happens if you buy a brand new home.
Yeah.
Brand new.
Yep.
Yeah.
So again, that's where the education comes in.
Yeah. So when you, with the advice, I mean, how much advice are you allowed to give? Like, have you got a special license to be able to give more advice, or
No,
every mortgage?
just technically just credit advice.
Okay.
But I can introduce people to financial planners, accountants, and the education, and we vet the education very, in a very detailed manner. And Mortgage Choice head office only let us deal with education partners, property advisors that they've vetted and screened, because obviously we don't want people buying bad stock. It's all got to be above board. Any commissions need to be disclosed. I'm not allowed to take commission from a property developer. That's wrong. It's ethically wrong, and Mortgage Choice won't let us do it, right? So there's all of that that's got to be considered as well. So anyone we deal with is what's called on our panel, which means they've been checked out by Mortgage Choice. They've got all the right public liability. It's a registered company. We know who the owners of the company are, all of that stuff.
Yep.
So they're not cowboys.
Yeah, we're not. And typically at our education seminars, we don't flog property. We don't show property. We just do the education piece.
Yeah.
And so this is what you should look for. If you want to go to the next step, go and talk to the property advisor.
Yeah.
Yep.
We'll do the loan for you. You go and talk to the property advisor, and that's the way it should be done.
Yeah.
I do get quite a lot of phone calls from property developers.
Yep.
Offering big bucks for intros.
Yeah, right.
I've had
I'm
15,
sure.
20
Quite dodgy.
grand offered just for one intro.
Wow.
Could be your mortgage broker license.
Yeah, well,
yeah, that's right.
I mean,
And you're trying to build clients here,
you're trying to
long-term
build
clients.
loyalty with your clients. I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
It's not worth. It's not worth it.
Nah.
It's not worth that. You know.
No.
But that's what property developers are offering.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's certainly a segment of the market that seems to be a law unto themselves and just
Yep.
riding shotgun.
Yep.
Mate, any
so
other?
I would make sure. Back to your question, I would get the deposit sorted out. Talk to a mortgage broker about how much you can borrow. I would point out that when you're talking to a mortgage broker, it does not get recorded on your credit report. Your comprehensive credit report is something that you should be aware of, and you should actually subscribe. Everybody should subscribe to Equifax, EQUIFAX, and you are entitled to one free credit report every year. That's legislated. They have to give it to you. You can subscribe. You can subscribe for a package. I'm not sure what the cost is, but if you want to subscribe for a package, they will notify you whenever anyone touches your credit report.
Yep. Okay.
The other key point is if you phone a bank and say, hey, I'm interested in getting a car loan, that goes on your credit report.
Yeah,
So
right.
how would
Because
that
they
affect
are,
your credit report?
because they are a lending institution. The government regulated that lending institutions need to put that on your credit report, which affects your credit score. Every time you get an inquiry on your credit score, it reduces your credit score by up to 50 points. So you, at the moment, if you've got a perfectly clean record, let's say you've got 1,000, your score's 1,000, right? If it gets below 700, you start losing credibility with lenders.
Yeah.
And some of them, like NAB, automatically decline.
Yeah. Wow.
Right? So if you don't know what's on your report, or if your broker doesn't know what's on your report, and they give it to one of the companies like NAB, who credit score, you could get an automatic decline, and you can't retrieve that.
Yeah, I remember
Can't
having that
retrieve
with
that.
when I was selling trucks. I had a customer who had rung around the banks himself.
So he
And
would
it
have
was
had 10 inquiries in the last 12 months.
It was a massive stuff up.
I don't understand how that reduced. Well, just by asking
Because
why.
with
What's
the credit score, what they know is that the number of inquiries you have increases the risk of your default. It's like doctor shopping, right?
Okay.
If you're shopping around for multiple loans,
Yeah.
right, they reduce your credit score because they deem you to be a higher risk of default in the future.
You're just looking for a bargain, really.
And that's what this guy was. This what this guy was doing. And it stuffed him
But
up.
the point is, you can do that with a mortgage broker, and it never gets recorded
Yeah.
until you actually apply for credit.
There's one of the benefits
So-
of
That's
going
an
with a mortgage
incentive.
broker,
So
right?
I can talk to 20 banks, and they don't even know who you are.
Yeah.
They just know, okay, purchase owner occupied. We've got this deposit. We've got this income. That's all they know.
Yeah.
Until I push the button, that's all they need to know,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But
Wow.
if you phone them directly, it goes on your credit
That's
score.
interesting.
And
Because how many people? What about? Because this is obviously a common thing now. You know, sitting at home in bed watching Netflix, just do a little loan application thing on the bank website. That would be recorded as
Yeah.
an inquiry. So straight away
Really?
Yeah,
leaves a fingerprint.
yeah.
I've
That's
done
what I
one
used
of
to call
those.
them. Like, there's fingerprints all over this.
I've got customers at the moment who we have, because that credit report shows everything for 24 months, right? So if they make 6 inquiries this month, we've got to wait 2 years before they drop off.
Yeah. Wow.
So it goes back up.
It goes back up, yes.
Okay,
It's a
all right.
2-year window.
It's like a demerit point system.
It's a 2-year window, right? And a lot of people don't know that. So it's very important, whether you're a first-time buyer or whether you're an investor who wants to build a property portfolio, it's very important you manage your credit report. And you can, as I said, you can get a free one every year,
I'm going to get onto that. I'll have a look at
Equifax.
that. Yeah.
or you subscribe and they will actually tell you anytime any inquiry is made. Now, I've had situations where I had a bad credit report and I show it to the people and they say, I don't know. That's not us. We don't have a loan with Macquarie Bank for a car. Oh, we worked out it was his twin brother, same residential address, same surname, same date of birth.
Oh, right. That's pretty
Right
rare.
now, that was a genuine mistake
Yeah.
from the bank,
Yeah.
and we've got that reversed.
Okay. Yeah.
Right, we got that reversed. So we ended up getting his loan 2 months, 3 months later.
Yeah.
Right? It was a refinance at the time, so we just had to stay where we were until we got that sorted, because we needed to refinance to get some more money to do home improvements. So that's that kind of scenario. There's also a scenario where during COVID, it was quite prevalent during COVID, right? People rang up their bank and said, okay, we haven't lost our job, but we just want to, pause the home loan payments until we know what's going to go on. And then all of a sudden, if you miss a payment, it goes on your credit report. If you've got 2, it really knocks your credit score. If you've got 3, basically you can't get a loan, and you've got to wait 2 years. So there's a lot of people during COVID that paused their payments, and we're still waiting for their credit score to improve.
Yep.
I think people were a little bit confused during that period of time, in terms of finance. The government was talking about all sorts of things, rent freezes. You
kick
could do
tenants
this. You
out,
can't kick
all of that.
tenants
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
And a lot of people probably thought, "Oh, beauty, there's a bit of a free ride going on here for 6 months," and not realising that you're going to pay at some point. And there's a bit of confusion.
So I
What
would
about when
definitely
you-
get onto the credit report.
What about when you just call them? So say, for instance, you called, hey, what's this thing? You can pause your thing. Does that go towards you without actually
No,
going?
it's only when you're asking for more money.
Okay, so say even if you refinance, you want to refinance,
Yep.
and you get accepted, does that go towards you?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Every inquiry,
Yeah.
every inquiry goes on there,
Okay.
right? And if there's 6 inquiries, quite often what we need to do as a mortgage broker is the bank will say, okay, well, we know one of them's the existing home loan. What are all the others? So we need to backtrack with the customer and say, what was this? CBA? Oh, it was a credit card. You've closed it? Right, I need the closure letter. What's this next one? ANZ? Oh, it was a car loan. It's closed. Okay, I need a closure letter. Oh, that one didn't go ahead? Okay, no worries.
What about with the monthly payments? So I've got mine set up automatic payments.
Yep.
And then I don't know if I've set it for like a year or 2 years or whatever it is.
Yep.
Say they expire and you miss the payment
Yep.
a few days in.
Yep.
And you're like, oh shit, I forgot to renew the thing.
14 days.
You got 14 days.
After 14 days, they'll report you. Yep.
Okay,
As a
so that
default.
doesn't go
That's
towards credit.
That's
right?
kind of a standard.
Yeah.
And I think most banks will text you or send you a message saying you missed your payment. You need to respond to it.
Yeah.
Either pay it straight away and give them a call. And the time frame is 14 days.
And
If
anything
they
within
don't
14
hear
days?
from you, if they don't hear from you in 14 days, it's on your file.
Okay. That's good to know. Yeah.
Mate, any other books that people should read?
Books that people should read. Yes.
Want to educate themselves?
Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Oh, yeah.
The whole Rich Dad, Poor Dad series. He's done a few. Especially, it is based on the US tax market, but as far as investment's concerned, we pretty much have the same thing in terms of depreciation. You can claim depreciation on your assets.
Yeah.
You can claim repairs and maintenance, all of that sort of stuff. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad, very good. Property for Dummies.
Oh, yeah.
Property for Dummies. There's a
That
whole
sounds like it's right up our alley. mate.
there's a whole series of those for investment and for owner occupied.
All right.
Just general terminology, they're good. And the Armchair Guide to Property Investing by Ben Kingsley.
The Armchair Guide.
Armchair Guide to Property Investing. Fantastic book. Covers everything. A little bit more detailed, but covers a lot. Even gets into a little bit of development stuff, which is, buying land, subdividing it,
Yep.
that sort of stuff.
Because all these things can be done.
We would think as sophisticated investors.
Yeah.
Your
Yep.
typical mum and dad investor just buy a property,
Yeah.
sit on it, get the rent, claim the tax deductions.
Yeah.
Sophisticated investors are more, buying. I've got one client that just recently bought 2 blocks of land with 2 old homes that had to be knocked down, right? 2 really old homes. In Bendigo, just down the road, $60 million refurb on the local hospital within a kilometre, 2 kilometres.
Yep.
So he bought these 2 blocks of land back to back. Houses have to be destroyed, like they're uninhabitable, right? Old houses. So 2 street frontages, 2 blocks back to back. 600 each, so 1.2. Went to council, got development approval for a block of apartments. Sold that approval with the land for $3.5 million.
Genius.
Yeah, genius. Wow. Didn't knock the houses down, just sold the approval.
Far out.
And on sold the land.
So within how long of buying it?
9 months it took us.
That's not a bad turnaround.
9 months, $2 million. And that was through a company.
Yeah.
Right? So then he would wrap that company up.
We need to talk more about this.
Take the profit
Yep.
and then start a new company for another project.
Wow.
And so he knew the hospital was going to get...
Yeah, it's all in the local newspapers, everything, and he's actually a builder. He's a builder from North Sydney. He doesn't build anymore. He's a builder from Northern Beaches. He's been a client of mine for pretty much since I started.
Just forward thinking, looking at opportunities.
That's all he does. That's all he does is do developments like that.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and he's got a sports centre, Port Stephens. He's got a sports centre which was a rundown, derelict squash court. Council didn't know what to do with it, right? So he's gone along and made a deal with them. He bought it. He bought it off. I think it might have been. He bought it off a liquidator, right? So it's a distressed estate, and it was run down. He borrowed, I think from memory, he paid 1.2 million. He's borrowed about $1 million, so all up 2.2. Just had it revalued for 6 mil, and borrowed against that valuation to do the next project.
What did he do with the squash court, though?
He's still got it. He owns it.
What, is he bringing squash back? Because this is a big problem in Australia.
Well,
There's not enough squash courts.
He's renovated it.
Yeah.
That he's got the squash courts, and he got involved. He's not a squash player, but he got involved and started sponsoring a couple of the Australian team, right? And now the Australian Squash Association have all of their meetings there.
Oh, wow.
Right?
This guy just touches everything.
Yeah, but
Errol
he's also
Flynn, mate.
He's also got a Formula One gym, the same one that you were looking at. Is it Formula 45 or
F45?
F45. So he's got one of those in there. He's got a physio. He's got martial arts club, and he's got a coffee shop, restaurant.
Yeah, wow.
So this was a derelict squash court, and the 1.2 million he borrowed to do the renovation, and then 6 months after, and he's leased out the coffee shop and the gym, so he's got tenants.
Yeah.
Right?
In each court.
He's got tenants in each one. Yeah.
Squash court.
Seriously.
Beautiful wooden floors in each shop.
We went back to ANZ, and it was only like 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, we borrowed the 1.2. I went back to ANZ and got it revalued for like 6. And he said, okay, I want another 1.5 million. I'm going to do another development against that property.
Yeah, right.
So now he's got another 1.5 in the bank to...
Amazing. So he just looks at these properties and just knows.
Forward thinking, right? That's...
And you sort of got to have the guts to just go in there and do it and just know that it's doable and just...
Yeah.
It's not really a risk, it's a calculated risk, you know.
He's obviously got the confidence and
experience. His experience as a builder meant he had to go through council approvals many, many times.
Yep.
So, again, he understands that process so well.
Yep.
Right.
You've got to start at some point, I suppose, you know.
Anything else you want to cover, mate? I think we're kind of...
You talked a little bit about mental health. You asked about what you think blokes are struggling with these days. Well...
Yeah, if you've got some thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think mental health's a big issue for blokes. Obviously, as part of my job, I do see family breakups happen sometimes, and that's always very difficult for both parties. I think, whether it's a family breakdown or a business breakdown, I think guys need to be able to open up and talk about it and have like a close circle of friends, whether it's like the hunting club or a walking club. You know, in Penrith they do the walk every Wednesday or Thursday night, and there's now one in the Blue Mountains which is run by a mate of mine, Sam Hussein.
So there's one down the coast too.
That walk for life, or walk for, I forget what they call it. But anyway, they get together on a weekly basis, and a bunch of guys just walk around Springwood or Penrith or whatever, do the river walk. But I think that sort of stuff's really important. I think what I see is family breakups and business breakups. There was quite a lot of businesses that didn't reopen after COVID.
Yeah.
Especially restaurants and small cafes. I mean, they're all back now, but I do know a couple of people that just gave it up.
I think there's. I heard a stat the other day. There's 1,000 small businesses a week go broke in Australia.
Wow.
1,000.
And the casualties from that to the families.
Yeah. That's where the mental health, where a lot of it comes from. I've got a friend that works, or he did work at CMP in Penrith, which is Christ Mission Possible, and they have little food vans that go out and feed the homeless. And he told me many years ago that the biggest cause of homelessness is family breakups.
Yeah, no doubt.
Where the guys, the family breaks up and he can't see his kids, and maybe gets on the drink and doesn't go to work and all that sort of stuff. Just a downward spiral. So having your mates close, I think is
that's
thing.
right.
One thing I wanted to ask when you're up in Cairns, how did your dad deal with that situation? Because it would have been, as a father...
Darwin.
Darwin, yeah. I mean, that would have been quite a pretty heavy thing to go through as a dad, as a young family.
Yeah.
The stresses of that. I mean, do you remember much how he dealt with it, or if he showed anything?
He got ordered to stay there. All the kids and all the wives were evacuated out like 3 or 4 days later. So we got put on a Herc and we were evacuated to Adelaide and then to Melbourne. And then a year later, after the cleanup was done, the military told all the men, you've got to stay there for a year.
Yeah.
So we weren't together for a year.
Wow.
And then he came and joined us in Melbourne, and then we got posted to the Blue Mountains.
Yep.
And that was where he finished his career. But he had PTSD anyway.
From other stuff.
Yeah, he was in the Malaya conflict, which was in the late 50s, 57, 58. He was a young man working in the jungle of Borneo, building aircraft runways. And he got shot by a sniper. He and 3 of his mates, I think, got shot by a sniper.
Wow.
And he got evacuated out to Germany. And after that, he met my mum. So he had PTSD anyway. And he never spoke about any of that, right? We never even knew about getting shot until after he passed away.
Really?
They gave us his records.
That's the generation, isn't it?
Yeah.
We
Just
didn't know.
Just don't tell.
We didn't know.
Don't
And
talk about it.
Afghanistan, like he would be away. I remember I was in high school. He was always away. We didn't know where he was. He wasn't allowed to tell us. And then we got his records back after he passed away. Afghanistan, Libya.
Everywhere.
Wow.
The
All
Middle
the
East,
hotspots.
Africa.
Yeah, wow.
Right? Not on the front line, always communication.
Yeah, in a supporting role somehow.
But I think he would go in there and make sure their communications was secure or whatever.
Yeah.
How do you think he managed all that? Like the
Drinking.
drinking. Okay,
Yeah.
so he became an alcoholic.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty common.
Yeah.
Common for men to.
Drinking.
Well-
And like I said, after he retired, didn't really have any hobbies, so it kind of went downhill pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So I think
That's another thing. I know that anyone retiring, needs to have a network and interests and some hobbies. Otherwise, your aging accelerates.
I think we know that now, or we should know it. I think my dad's generation were a little bit different. They didn't talk about anything, right?
No, agree.
I'll leave you with something, fellas.
What's you got a quote for us?
I got a quote from Mark Twain.
Oh, bit of Twain.
Oh.
Buy land. They are not making it anymore.
Yeah, I love that one.
Wow.
That's a good one. Yeah, that is a good one. Yeah.
All right.
Unless you're buying it in the metaverse, in which case they're making lots of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We won't go into it.
No,
Right.
that's another.
A mate took me down that rabbit hole. I was sitting there scratching my head, going, "Not what is the world coming to? They're building another
is
world."
That this like this 3D stuff?
Yeah.
You
What
can
was
actually
it called?
buy
Something
property
Earth,
in this.
Earth 3 or something.
I can't remember what it was called, but
Yeah, it's
buy
like
land
it's like in the metaverse,
Yeah.
and you can buy your block of land. You know, or maybe virtually, you could buy where the Opera House is. If you get in early enough, you could buy that land. It's crazy. Let's not go down there. We'll disappear.
We'll have to get.
No, we'll all be sitting here going, "What on earth are we talking about?" Because it's.
I know a guy who during COVID, a mortgage broker, friend of mine, during COVID, he and his son got into trading Bitcoin.
Yeah.
He made $100,000
Wow.
in a year.
Yeah.
Just buying and selling. He was very religious about it, so he would be watching it all the time, and if he made a gain, he would sell it.
Full-time job.
Put back his initial investment, right? Just kept doing that every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a client who made, I think he put in 200 grand, and within, it could have been 6 months, over $1 million.
Wow.
Bought a house.
Wow.
In Marrickville or somewhere in the west there.
Wow.
That was it.
Amazing.
Done.
Wow.
I was like, fuck, mate. Sign me up.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, let's wrap it up. But how can people get hold of you, Steve? If they want to talk
on
to you,
the website Mortgage Choice /Steve Roddick, or just go to the Mortgage Choice and search for Penrith Brokers.
Yep.
All the usual social media stuff: Facebook, Instagram.
Yep.
Steve
We'll pop up a
Roddick.
link on the description.
And 4th of October, Penrith Panthers. We're doing an education night. It's actually run by all of the mortgage brokers in Penrith, all of the Mortgage Choice brokers.
Yep.
So we've come together and we're doing that education piece to
great
help
idea.
people.
Yep.
And we'll probably do that every 6 months. I think.
All
I think it's needed.
And to get tickets to that, you just contact Panthers.
No, I'll send you
same-
you guys a link, and then you can forward it on to people if you want.
All right.
We can pop it up again on the
Yeah.
description there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thanks for your time, mate. It was a
Pleasure.
Thanks,
Thank
Steve.
you.
Awesome.
Let's go hunting.
Yeah,
When's the
absolutely.
next trip?
Yeah, not too far away. We're where are we going?
October, 8th.
Yeah, not too far away.
Oh, that's not
back
far
to
away.
back to our Murrurundi.
Was that a club hunt or?
No, we just.
Dave just booked it. He's a sort of instigator of these
Be
things.
nice and warm then.
I know, that's why we've got to get in early and
It won't be too hot.
try and get the
probably.
job done nice and early in the day.
Yeah, it's just like you've got a few
Got
skulls
a
here now,
couple
Dave.
upstairs as well. We've got to put up.
Yeah. Good job, mate.
Awesome, mate. Yeah, fantastic.